You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, welcome to our last show before we go on vacation for the next week. Thanks for joining us. That'll do it for us today.
Happy 4th. Actually, you're probably hearing this after the 4th, so hope you had a fabulous 4th. You're probably sitting...
I'm not going to tell anyone where I'm going.
I think everybody knows.
No, they don't.
They don't know. Anyways, I'm not going to tell them either. But thank you for joining us. And this is episode 1006. Very, very excited that we're working our way towards 2000, and it's only because of you guys. And I know we've said this 1,000+ times, but we really do appreciate that you hang with us on this show.
Yeah, we do really appreciate it. Also appreciate the feedback and the support. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, there's just so much going on. And then I meet someone who's listened to the show and heard about how much it's helped them. And gosh, it's inspiring. So thanks for listening. Keep listening. We're here for you. If you truly want to support the show, leave a review or become a Drone U member. Actually, with how many listeners we have, I'm surprised we don't have more members, especially with all the converts we've been having lately from some of the other schools. And I think one of my favorite quotes is, you always talk so much about the other schools and what was wrong, and I always wondered why. And he goes, it's either that you're extremely passionate about it or you're a hater. And he's like, and I've learned that you're extremely passionate about it. And now that I've taken your classes, I cannot believe the extreme difference in depth and detail. And it's just like, again, I care. So on that definitely newsworthy note, which it's not newsworthy at all. Let's move on to today's question, which we are talking once again about mapping deliverables. And it's funny because when I was working at a accredited college teaching drone stuff, 2012, before Drone U took off, we had counted about 998 uses of drones. None of them involved mapping. None of them.
And now imagine all of those that do involve mapping.
I think that you could actually find... here, I found a new one actually.
Or photogrammetry.
So I was talking to the director of Hell or High Water, Taylor, I think it's Hutchinson, Taylor. And he was talking about how they're now using drones for mapping in the special effects department.
Very cool.
And I was like, which mapping program are you using? I want to know. Because they're all about 3D textured meshes when they're doing that type of mapping. So I was like, I really want to know. And I actually talked to Parker recently. Parker was doing that capture reality class for us. And he's like, dude, I really want to show you something about, acquisition for the baseball stadiums. Really want to give it a shot. And I showed him the new baseball stadium that I had done. I was like, how different is this from the old baseball stuff that we were doing? And he was like, holy, like literally, like, I can't believe that. Like, wow. And I said, we're really looking at Bentley now. I said, we love Pix4D, still teaching Pix4D. I think it's definitely the solution for 95% of the mappers out there. But there are other specialized solutions that are really good for workflow as well. In fact, we just did an enterprise training last week, and it was all about volumetric measurements. I mean, that's literally all he wanted to know. It was like, it took our mapping training from like 3 12-hour-long days to like 3 8-hour-long days, because he just didn't care about facade mapping, didn't care about 3D reconstruction, didn't care about, merging models together. We still did that exercise. But he was really interested in volumes and car accidents.
Oh, was he really? Interesting. Well, for obvious reasons, I guess.
Yep.
On the car accidents part.
Then I found out, this goes deeper. The guy whose job that he's shooting for is already doing volumes, right, with drones.
Okay.
Never uses ground control points.
Oh, so our guy is going to slide right in there.
Oh, he already did, and he did it with one question. How do you expect to verify the measurements? I mean, it was literally like... boom, like goodbye. Like, I mean, it was one of those moments where I had that weird, evil Dave-like laugh.
Oh,
that I didn't actually do that, but I was just sitting there going, "Oh man, sucks to suck." So, I mean, this is why we teach people so adamantly about GCPs, and that's also why we do the scale constraint exercise. Scale constraints are powerful. Anyway, I'm going to stop getting off my high horse. If you want to join us for an experience training, just go to thedroneu.com, hit the training tab, and go to events and check it out.
Be glad you did.
I'm just ready for story time, Rob, okay?
I'll tell you a story.
Hey, Paul. Hey, Rob. My name's Austin Scheib. I'm a drone service provider in Southeast North Carolina. My question today is, if we, as drone service providers, aren't allowed to sell mapping with measurements, what mapping deliverables can you sell to a client without a licensed surveyor signing off on it? And what is your claim to accuracy? I listened to your podcast about the provider in North Carolina that was approached by the survey board, and I just want to stay away from those accusations. Thanks for everything y'all are doing for the drone community. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this topic. Thanks.
Okay, Rob, let me just start off really quick. Okay, I'm going to give my official stance on this whole surveying thing, okay?
Oh, boy.
Step number
This always
one.
makes me nervous.
Surveyors have a legitimate thing to fear. People drawing boundary lines and trying to showcase legal ownership of property without having a licensed surveyor. I've seen this in Facebook groups. I've seen this elsewhere. There is a legitimate fear. But that is...
So fear and concern.
Fear and concern.
Okay.
Fear and concern. But that fear is very small, very minuscule, because surveyors, while they have been measuring and showcasing boundary lines for quite some time, we've also been taking measurements on our own for quite some time. So that's very different from drawing boundary lines. You cannot draw boundary lines unless you are working with a surveyor. You cannot legally showcase accuracy, especially RMS error, unless you are a surveyor. It depends on your state. There are a lot of states that actually you can showcase accuracy as long as you don't state the accuracy. Rather, you provide a report of how the accuracy calculations were done by the software, which you did not do, and they can state your accuracy. So when he asks the question of how do you state your accuracy, guess what? I don't. I hand them a report that says, I'm not really sure about the accuracy. Here's what, I'm not a surveyor. Here's what the report is showing me. We all know though, because, I'm a smart mapper. I'm not a dumb one. We all know that the ultimate verification of accuracy is done in a third-party software like ESRI or ArcGIS or QGIS. So why don't you just take what I've done for you and throw it in there and tell me what you see, okay? That being said, on the flip side of this, while drone pilots do need to be working with a licensed surveyor to do ALTA surveys, boundary surveys, a certain civil engineering work, there are a lot of caveats. Well, there's not a lot of caveats to that. That work, you need to work with a surveyor. But beyond that, oftentimes you don't need to work with a surveyor. And in fact, there has been a lot of rent-seeking behavior that is really frustrating to me. In fact, even after the state of California did a great thing by showcasing, hey, drone pilots can create maps. It's all about what is the intended purpose? Mm-hmm. Is it being sold? And then what was the other one? We did a really long show about that, and it was a really good one. I'm trying to remember. It was like accuracy, boundary lines. I can't remember. But this rent-seeking behavior, so they came out with a report and said, look, drone pilots are just a part of the process. It all depends on what you do with that map and how it's interpreted to essentially showcase whether a surveyor is needed or not. But then we got a letter from the state of California, and I let Rob reply to that one because I wanted to literally respond with a one-sentence email that says, did you listen to our podcast about surveying in California? Because I think what you're worried about is something that you don't need to be worried about. And frankly, it's funny because there have been some letters that have gone out from state boards of surveying that say, you can't do this, you can't do that, you have to respond to us by a certain time. First of all, no, you don't. You need to make sure that they have the authority that they do, because oftentimes this just can be like an industry association or an industry affiliate. It's not actually a government entity. So step one, make sure they're a government entity. Step two, are they a regulatory entity? Are they a legislative entity? Or are they what is it? Executive, legislative, executive, I'm missing one, enforcement. Anyway, long story short, do they have the ability to do legal enforcement? Because a lot of these letters that are being sent out essentially have this broad stroke of what you cannot do with your drone. But yet when I brought this up to a couple of very close friends who use drone mapping for very important things, and I showed him this very particular letter and read it to him, he said, well, if that was true with what the state of X said about drone pilots needing to work with surveyors, how are police officers taking measurements of accident scenes without surveyors? He's like, and they've been doing that for like 50, 60 years. He's like, no, let's dumb this down a little bit more. We all have a measuring tape in our car, right? We want to measure something in the backyard. Do I need a surveyor to get an accurate measurement? No.
I thought a great example was measuring a section of your yard in order to know how much gravel to order,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not going to need a surveyor for that.
No.
So the question is,
and you don't legally need one either.
where is
But
that
there-
law drawn?
To make the surveyors happy, if you're doing boundary lines or ALTA surveys, yes, you need to work with a surveyor. But you also need to check your state law because this stuff varies from state to state. Some states like California are very, very strict, but they're also very, very strict with their vernacular because some of this rent-seeking behavior is borderline bounds, like in a litigious state like California, borderline harassment. Borderline harassment. In fact, I mentioned this to Pops, told him what had happened. I'm not going to go into any more detail on the show about what happened. And he said, you could sue them for X, Y, and Z, right? Just because of that letter. He's like, literally, here's the line where you could sue them and probably get at least 3 million. He's like, here's the line you can get at least 1 million. He's like, here's the line you can get at least 20 million. He's like, they are literally, they just wrote you a letter that says the Sherman Act of the federal government doesn't exist. It's like, here we go again. So look, we all know that old men want to protect their businesses. And it's unfortunate because if they were just to change like some of these other surveyors that are enacting, tools of their trade, then they understand how powerful it is. And they wouldn't need to be so worried about their competition because they'd be so busy. It's that simple. But going back to this, I want to get off the high horse because there's a lot of great surveyors out there. In fact, we met 3 at the FAA symposium. They were very nice. They're like, look, we agree with you and we really appreciate what you say. So I don't want to get too hung up on surveyors because I'm not mad at surveyors. I love surveyors. Some of the funnest people I've ever met were surveyors. One of my, I look up to someone who's a surveyor, George
the
Washington.
reality is there are certain things where you have to have a surveyor.
True.
Period.
But there are also a lot of other things that you don't need a surveyor for. For example, one of our clients was doing an electrical inspection with a drone. Okay. And all he did was use the as-built as the base layer. And the state of, I'm not going to say it, the state of blank board of surveyors said, you can't do that. You're mapping. And I'm like, he's not mapping. He didn't sell it. It's not transactional. It's not showcasing boundaries. Like, guys, quit it. Like, literally, stop. Or else you're going to get sued for someone who has a really powerful lawyer in harassment, and you guys are going to lose everything. And you're going to be the story that everyone says, watch out, you don't want to be like those guys. Yeah. So I think it's something to be careful about. Now, when we talk about, I know you're getting upset because we're not actually talking about what are the deliverables that you can provide.
I'm not either. I'm just letting you have your high horse moment.
I'm done. I'm back. I'm back.
So we're back to his question about deliverables that are most likely legitimate. And let's actually get out of that gray area of most likely.
I just have to say one more time, this depends on the state that you live in.
Absolutely.
Because here in New Mexico, you can do elevations of construction sites with drones. In I think it's in Texas and California, you need a surveyor to do elevations at a construction site. So it really, 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 really depends on the state that you live in.
Sure.
So now there are a lot of things that you just universally across the board don't need surveyors to do. And that's if you do a 3D model of an area or an ortho mosaic of an area, for example, you don't need a surveyor for an ortho. Because an ortho is literally like what disaster relief uses to understand which houses are, messed up and which aren't. You're doing roof inspections, typically again done with drone mapping. You don't need a surveyor for that. You're doing solar inspections. You don't need a surveyor for that. If you're doing, real estate 3D reconstruction, and this is again visual reconstruction. We're not talking about verifying property lines. We're not talking about verifying square footage. Okay. As long as you're not verifying square footage or boundary lines, you can do a 3D map of the area and then maybe do an interior map and merge those together. And now you have the best tour available for that particular site. Other things you don't need a surveyor for is NDVI mapping, crop resource management. Gosh, there's so many that you don't need a surveyor for. The stuff that you need a surveyor for is typically civil engineering, typical surveying things.
Which, as a drone pilot that's not a surveyor and doesn't understand that stuff, well, I would not want to mess with that stuff.
You know what
You've
I want to
got
do?
lives at stake, literally. with
I
some
want to
of
go
this.
completely disrupt the entire surveying market.
How so?
Change all the rules, get a bunch of money, go to the SBA, create a fund of money from the SBA, and say that there's a bunch of rent and sinking behavior that's inhibiting the growth of multiple industries because there's a misunderstanding of stitching photos together. I go back to the panoramic photo, by the way. And I think that we need to, essentially clarify this and whatnot. Also, if I was a surveyor, then I would have a lot more pull in getting that money. I would have a lot more pull in changing laws state by state. I would go to the tort committee and completely change everything because we've learned from a couple other companies like AirMap that all you need is a ton of money to get your way in Congress. So, and I think that's actually a poor example. I think that there are a lot of other examples that are much more prominent that showcase that everyone thinks that we live in a democracy, which we do, but at the end of the day, we live in a financial democracy. Do you know what that means, Rob? That's a coined term I just made up.
Therefore, I don't know what it means.
It means we pay for what we want. So if you want something, you go to Congress and you spend millions of dollars and you lobby and then you give people money for their CPAC and then you say, this is what I need help with. That's the staunch reality of the United States of America.
Yes, unfortunately for now. But there's a lot of good. Anyways, let's not get on that soapbox
Yeah, it's
either.
not always a bad thing either.
Right.
That's the thing, is that if there's an issue in this country, at least we have a pathway to say, let's force this issue being handled.
Absolutely.
So I think there's pros and cons. Just like, everyone's worried that drones are now threatening the lives of surveyors. Drones are just a tool. It's just a DeWalt tool. If a DJI was called DeWalt, guarantee everyone would think about it differently. Guarantee. So, okay, back to what you can do, mapping deliverables, volumetric measurements and linear measurements, depending again on the state. Typically, in most cases, you are allowed to do. And the proof in the pudding is police officers. Police officers are not surveyors. They're not civil engineers. They take linear measurements and they also take volumetric measurements, and they are held up in court all the time. So, it's so funny because I would always talk to my dad about some of these deep legal issues. And, one of the other issues is Native Americans, thinking that they own the airspace. And I just always give the example. I'm like, well, there's a Southwest jet right there. Did they call the chief for permission? Didn't think so. Very simple, and when I talk about simple in this particular case, it always comes down to case law. Mm-hmm. Right? Just like when drones and privacy, obviously, I think somewhere down the line, there's going to be a privacy case that will showcase the case law for how it is determined. So far, privacy has been actually showcased through case law significantly. And it's very clear in my eyes, but again, we live in a litigious society. Someone may sue for privacy claims. And then there would be case law that says, okay, for sure, unless you're in your house, you do not have a reasonable right to privacy, period. That's the world we live in. And if you really don't believe that that's the case, you need to Google a company called planet.us and then just type in your address. All right, I'm done. Okay, but I mean, when it comes to case law, it's so important because there hasn't been case law about surveying and drones yet.
Exactly.
So there's been a lot of hate mail, and guys, this is made to scare you. Don't be scared by this. This is someone saying, let's send a certified letter to make sure they get it, and we're going to tell them there's a deadline so that they have to respond. Do you want to know the old lawyer trick for deadlines? Send them a one-sentence response by the deadline. And then the second sentence is a new deadline. And then you send it on the last day. So it shows up at the office at 4:30 p.m. because typically most executives are out of the office in the afternoon on a Friday. So, I mean, dude, I could go on the list of tricks by lawyers because it's a long one. So you could literally sink someone with just the cost of a lawsuit if you know how to execute it properly. Which is a terrible thing to say, but it's the dead honest truth, and everyone needs to know about it.
Well, I think everybody knows how litigious our society is without question, but you said don't need to be fearful, and I absolutely agree. What you need to be is knowledgeable, you need to be educated, and you need to start with your state. If these are the kinds of things that you want to do, dig in and understand what is actually required, because I think while there will be some gray area, it's inevitable when you're talking about something like this. I think you can squeeze that gray area and get to black and white relatively simply if you put in the time and figure it out. And then I think you can move forward without fear because you've put in the research and maybe even talk to people that are in the industry that you know. If you get told something by somebody who's in the industry, just know that there's potentially some bias there. There probably will be. And so you're going to have to back up anything they say with information. If you ask them to back up that information, my hunch is they won't be able to. And so you'll have to do that yourself. But be educated, be knowledgeable, and be fine.
I think the only way to overcome fear is education.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the people who need to be educated the most are the people who have such confidence in that their position is correct.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, arrogance, that's when you get in trouble from that.
I think I've learned that the most successful people in life don't care what other people think, but are cognizant of perception. Okay. Second off, they're extremely focused. And I forgot the most important point of this whole thing. Jeez. And you were talking about being teachable.
Cliffhanger. Yeah.
And it's being teachable. The third thing is being teachable. If you are astute, but you're also flexible, then you have the least propensity to be bent out of shape.
I agree. I think teachability is incredibly important.
I think also we've seen that with our student base. Mm-hmm. Most of the most successful students were all the most teachable. I want to learn as much as possible, but they weren't overly excited. They were very systems oriented. They were serious.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Love it. That's one of the primary tenets that I try to instill in my kids is be teachable.
And if you think that you're not teachable or it's difficult to change, just understand that's completely normal and human. It takes a very, very systematic approach to be willing to change. In fact, I'm reading a new book right now. I got to add it to my book list. You know, my book list has been viewed over 30,000 times. Yeah, it shows
Look
that on Google Sheets. I was like, wow.
It's like Oprah, Paul.
Yeah, right. Yeah. 1,030,000. No big, it's very similar, whatever.
Close.
But this book is Switch. It's made by the guys called Made to Stick. I'm only 2 chapters deep in it because I drove from the ranch here this morning, which was a solid 3-hour drive. So it's a good one so far. It's actually really, really interesting. I had to, I'm not going to lie, skip through the second half of the first chapter because I was bored.
Yeah, that happens.
But anyway, check it out. Guys, girls, thank you. Thank you for supporting us. Please leave us a review. Send in those questions, askdroneyou.com. Rob, thank you, bud.
Thank you.
No, really, thank you. You've helped me humble myself.
No.
You've helped me understand the ranting is good and normal and just do it off camera. You have really been someone
voice.
who What?
No.
You have been
It's all good. You're going to make me blush. All right.
Well, without you, I would not be where I am. So I want to say thank you.
I feel the same way.
Well,
Teamwork.
Ditto.
To use the old cliche. Teamwork.
Dreamwork.
The dream work. All right.
Boom.
That's kind of a yucky way to end it, actually. That's pretty lame.
That was lame. Dad joke.
Yeah.
Hey, man, I got the dad bod, not you. I'm the one supposed to be making the dad joke. On that bombshell, that's going to do it for us today. My name is Paul.
And I'm Rob.
This is Ask Drone U.